My name is Joe Prony, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I want to talk about how to avoid interpersonal consequences by creating a supportive emotional experience for people. So today is going to be part 2 of the show that I did last week. In order to provide a supportive emotional experience, you need to be able to create a safe, non-judgmental place for other people to be able to express emotions, feelings, desires, opinions, attitudes, and let them run their course without any type of coercion or manipulation, whether it be verbal or nonverbal. Now that sounds like it's pretty difficult to do, and it seems to be for most people actually. However, if you can provide somebody with a supportive emotional experience, it correlates to a high self-esteem, autonomy, emotional health, physical health, and life satisfaction. But if you can't provide a supportive emotional experience, it leads to creating a negative relational template for the person. Now, keep in mind in relationships here, I'm talking about whether it's a romantic relationship or whether we're trying to increase our parenting skills. So if you create a negative relational template, this correlates to low self-worth, codependence, personality disorders, mood disorders, and having lifelong difficulty in relationships with the self as well as with other people. If you can provide a supportive emotional experience to somebody who has never experienced being emotionally supported before, there's a very good possibility that you can create a corrective emotional experience that's going to absolutely and completely change their life. That's why it's so important. So that brings across the next question. How can all of us be better at providing a safe place to create a supportive emotional experience? And there's a lot of parts to it, but for today, let's break it down to 2 parts. So number 1, I would say, for the individual themselves to be able to create this place, you need to be able to break down your own walls, which includes letting go of your ego. And number 2, how to break down other people's walls in a safe way. So let's start off with the first part, how to break down your own walls. So there's 3 questions here to help determine if your walls right now are too big to create a safe place for somebody else. So let's go through them. Number 1, are you able to be in the presence of an emotional person without arousing your own emotions, which may cause you to withdraw or to change the subject? That's number 1. Number 2, do you personalize other people's stories, causing you to internalize your experience and not theirs? And as a quick aside on this one, when I was in graduate school, one of the students, she ended up being thrown out of the program. And the reason for this is that she did have a very important loss in her life. And it affected her so much that when she was going to do therapy on other people, she internalized everybody else's experience, and it always came out to be through her lens of grief and how it affected her. So the therapy sessions always ended up being about her, and she really had a hard time listening to somebody else because all roads led back to grief, such as somebody would say, my husband and I went for coffee on Saturday. And her thought would be, I don't have somebody to go have coffee with. So it affected everything. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for her prospective clients, she was she was told to leave the program. So number 3 in our questions, do emotions and opinions of other people make you feel inadequate, which can possibly cause you to be defensive, to belittle people, to gaslight people, to reject them in some way, to invalidate them in some way, to stigmatize or demonize them. To illustrate this a little bit more, let me give you an example from me. As a young child, I was about 5 years old, and I learned at an early age, when my parents came back from this second honeymoon. I went to Niagara Falls, and my mother came back, and I was like, oh, where's my gift? You know, as a little kid would do. And they didn't have any gifts for me. There were no toys. There was nothing like that. So she handed me like a postcard or something of the picture of the Niagara Falls, which would be great for an adult, but not for me. So there was a few of them. So I threw them against the wall, and I ran in the room. And she came in into the room after me, and she was crying. And I didn't know it back then, but obviously her feelings were hurt that she didn't get the right gift for a 5-year-old. But one of the things I was starting to realize at a very early age, unconsciously though I would say, is that I'm the one who had to manage my parents' emotions because of their immaturity. Keeping in mind, I think my mother at this point was about 22 years old, and my father was like 24, 25. So that kind of makes sense, but at a very early age, I was already learning that my emotions and feelings could be very hurtful to other people. So the best way to deal with that was to either not have them, to just totally ignore them, and if I had them, definitely don't speak about them. As time went on, my parents got divorced. My mom and my sister and I, we ended up moving to a place on Long Island called Baldwin, and it's what you would call like a perfect, ideal type of town. There were lakes and parks and everything else there. The school system was incredibly great. I don't remember any type of criminal type of stuff there. It was a very safe place, very family oriented. Everything was great, except the fact that my family had no money, and everybody else around me lived in houses, really nice houses. They had boats, they lived on the water, and they had all the major things that any upper middle class family would have, except the fact that we were not that, we were poor. And it created a situation where even growing up, if I wanted, say, a pair of shoes, my parents would guilt me into thinking, well, why would I ever want something like that? I was obviously too selfish, too self-centered. You know, it was my fault that I wanted too many things. Basically, my parents' immaturity was, instead of to admit or to be able to talk about something open, as I was saying before, my feelings and emotions were not allowed to run their course. I had to be emotionally beaten down to say that every thought I had was wrong. And yet, I could look around me everywhere and see that everybody else was different and they were living different than me. So in this situation, you could say there was, my parents were defensive, they gaslighted me, there was a certain amount of belittling going on. They were rejecting my thoughts, feelings, opinions, perceptions. There was an invalidation there to all of that. So what did I learn? What I learned is that I can't have needs, don't ask for anything, don't rock the boat because it makes everybody else around me feel bad. Make sure your emotions don't hurt anybody else. Only say things that aren't going to trigger somebody else's immaturity. And again, overall, my parents were really great people, no doubt about it. But to be able to provide a supportive emotional experience, it would have went more like I'm trying to teach you, is that there should be no coercion, no manipulation, and there should be honesty. In other words, it could have been, we don't have a lot of money, but we decided that it's better to, if you don't have a lot of money, to live in a poor area in a great neighborhood, so we can provide you with a better degree of people, a better degree of teachers, the school system was great, and you're going to be safe here. So overall, you're going to be the poor person in a relatively rich area, but the benefits will definitely outweigh everything. And by the way, I do understand that everybody here, their parents have brand new Cadillacs and this, and we don't have that. So again, it would be open and honesty about the situation instead of the whole thing of trying to make it seem like my reality was totally skewed and there was something wrong with me. And the reason why I didn't have the things I wanted was because I didn't work hard. And when I looked at it, I was like, well, how is that possible? Because I noticed that my mother had 2 and 3 jobs and we didn't have anything. And yet most of my friends had mothers who didn't have any jobs and they had 10 times as much as we did. So I couldn't put this together when I was a little kid, and it only made me angrier as I got older. So that's the first part, breaking down your own walls, allowing your partners in life or your children to be able to express feelings, emotions, and perceptions without trying to manipulate them. Let those feelings run their course. Number 2 on how to create a safe environment is to be able to help break down other people's walls in a safe way. And this is kind of how we can do this. So number 1, don't push through the wall. I was watching a documentary the other day. I guess it's okay to mention her name. Listen, she's got millions of dollars. But Teal Swan. And it's interesting how people just love her to the point of her like running a cult. And yet she has no nuance whatsoever that I can see. If there's any type of push up against her, she just barrels right through the wall and causes even more trauma to people. But be that as it may, people love her, and I guess, whatever. But what I'm saying here is that there is no evidence that just smashing somebody through a wall is actually therapeutic. What you want to do is you don't want to push through the wall. You want to do it at their own pace, number 1. Number 2, you want to be curious. What you want to do is you want to find out why the person's defense system is so important to them and how it got there. So again, we're trying to clarify their defense system. We're not trying to clarify their feelings, which is very interesting because many therapists open up with that all the time and they keep hammering that home. So how do you feel? How do you feel? Most people don't want to talk, most people don't want to open up and talk about that until a long time, until they develop some type of trust. Most men I know would never think about going to therapy because that's the first question that they ask, and then they ask the same question in 10 different ways over and over again, and they browbeat, especially men, to death about how do you feel, how do you feel. The real question should be is to be curious about why they have the defense system they do, and that'll get them to talk, because it also creates more empathy. For example, if you ask a man why he has difficulty talking about his feelings, he probably has a lot of instances where he was told that when he was very young, he was 5 years old and he cried, so his mother even slapped him in the face and told him not to. So to have that and to be able to open up about that is invaluable in creating a corrective emotional experience. So here are a few questions that I think could be very valuable when we're trying to break down somebody's walls, whether it's our child, whether it's our partner, whether it's our parents even. Number 1, what do you think could happen if you talked about how you feel? A simple question there, being inquisitive. We're not trying to hurt anybody. Number 2, if you showed vulnerability, what might happen between us right now? Number 3, what has happened with other people that you don't want to happen right here if you were to tell me about how you felt? And number 4, how did fill in the blank, your mother, your father, your daughter, your son, whoever, a teacher, how did so-and-so respond to you when you expressed anger, sadness, depression? So in doing this, we're being very inquisitive, and what we could learn is why they do the things they do instead of standing in front of a person and browbeating them down to tell us exactly how they feel. So again, what we're doing here is not going after the content, but we're going after and asking and inquiring and doing an empathetic inquiry about their defense system. So I hope this has been valuable today. Today we're trying to avoid interpersonal consequences by creating a supportive emotional experience today. And I gave you two major things to look at in order to be that type of person who can create a positive emotional experience for somebody. Number one, learn how to break down your own walls, see through your own agenda and difficulties, break down your own ego, and how to start to get around somebody else's wall by not trying to slam their head through it. My name is Joe Prony. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.